If you ever dip your toes into the YouTube movie reviewing sphere, you've probably heard the name FoodFight, whether it be from an actual review of the movie or just a passing joke about the movie's quality. But no matter how or where you found it, you can't lie, FoodFight is one of the worst movies ever. It essentially fails at everything, whether it be from the animation, the writing, the characters, the story, the poop rat. Mix that all in and you have an understanding as to why FoodFight is considered one of the poster boys for bad movies. But now here's the question. Who made FoodFight? Who was the brainchild for one of the worst animated movies ever? And the answer to that question is Lawrence Kasanoff, who I will be calling Larry throughout this video because Lawrence would kinda get tedious, to be honest. For a brief rundown on who Larry is, he is essentially a movie producer. Some of his notable work include Platoon, Dirty Dancing, Terminator 2, True Lies, a Mortal Kombat duology, and the list kinda goes on. Alongside that, he also helped form two companies, Lightstorm Entertainment with James Cameron and Threshold Entertainment. But despite that impressive track record of films, it seems like FoodFight definitely hurt his career. As we can see, aside from being an executive producer on films like Bobbleheads and the new Mortal Kombat film, he has not really done anything noteworthy. But a decade after FoodFight, he went on to create a book. The book's name? A Touch of the Madness. The book is very much a self-inspirational book, where the message is it's okay to go a bit crazy because you never know if it's gonna pay off or not. The book is also biographical in a way that Larry recounts his experiences in the industry as going a little crazy, also known as his touch of madness. So, with all that out of the way, let's dip our toes in to get that touch of the madness. Since the book is pretty much off the radar in terms of general release, how did I find it? Well, it was due to a new FoodFight documentary that came out in May this year, which I highly recommend you go and watch. It's very interesting in terms of how much of a shit show FoodFight really was in terms of production. But my first knowledge into the book's existence was in the form of a comment made by the channel owner, whose pseudonym is Ziggy, which was in the form of a comment of where Larry was now. But when I first read it, I actually just kinda brushed it off until the Q&A stream he did, where he showed a music video that was based off of the book. I didn't think much of it initially, but over time, curiosity just got the best of me. Alongside searching for the music video and the book itself, I also took a look at Larry's websites. Larry has 3 different websites, his personal one, the Threshold one, and the Touch of Madness one, all of them pretty identical to one another. Mostly just talking about his professions and his achievements in life, nothing really too special. Although there is one thing I want to point out on all of his 3 different websites. The first one is his own website because of this picture. I'm sorry, but the picture just makes it look like he's about to be sniping some ops in Call of Duty. The second interesting thing is on his Threshold website, specifically showcasing their work. To be clear, this is something that only happens on mobile and not on a computer, as far as I'm aware. But still, how the fuck does this happen? And the last one before we get into the actual book is one on the book's website about supposed reviews. Yeah, I say reviews in quotes because, well, just look at it. What can I say except this is the most pathetic way to promote your book? But either way, let's just get on with the book and see what it has to offer. The book contains 7 chapters, but for this preview version that I'll be using, it only has 3 chapters. So yeah, sorry I'm going the cheap route, but I'm not really paying that much and I'm kind of too lazy to do all of that. But anyway, let's just get in. As mentioned beforehand, the book contains Larry recounting his past experiences in the movie industry, alongside intersplicing it with advice on how to be creative, with it mostly relating on how you should focus on what the audience wants, not what you want. In terms of the advice Larry gives in this book, I honestly think that it's not too bad in and of itself. And I think some of the things Larry definitely says in this book is definitely inspirational for some, especially for someone like me who likes to go a little crazy with ideas. But despite the well-meaning message throughout the book, the biographical part seems to be rough to me. Now I do want to preface to say that everything I say in this part should not be taken as a fact, but more so taken as a suspicion more than anything. I also want to preface to say that do not send any hate towards Larry because of this part. But anyways, here are my suspicions with the biographical stuff. The first suspicious part of the story comes at the very beginning of it, where Larry talks about making Platoon. The very first thing he mentions in the story is that he became head of production for a studio called Vestron, which for those of you who don't know, Vestron was an independent film studio that basically was the king of home media. This is technically true and technically not. Larry was head of production for Vestron, but that was for a different subsidiary for Vestron, not the main one. Keep that in mind for the next suspicious thing I'm going to be talking about in this story. Platoon came out in 1986, a whole year before Lightning Pictures. So there is no way that Larry could have greenlit Platoon in 1987. Larry also mentions that Vestron financed another Oliver Stone film, but I cannot find any information to back that up. And speaking of that, I also could not find any information that Vestron had anything to do with Platoon outside of home media distribution. And I know some of you are gonna mention that, oh, you said that Larry worked on Platoon, why are you saying that this whole thing is bogus? And to that I say is, yes, Larry did work on Platoon, as a production manager that went uncredited. Something you need to realize that if Larry was the head of production when he greenlit Platoon, that would make him an executive producer. So why would he be an uncredited production manager if he was the one that greenlit it? It's like what Dexter Detective said. It just doesn't add up. Another part I consider suspicious in the story is what happens after Platoon released, where Larry mentions that he ran into Oliver Stone at a bar in New York, which Oliver supposedly praised Larry for having this supposed touch of madness, hence the book's title. Considering what we've gone over and considering the context of the story, this is supposedly when Larry was head of production for Vestron, and in the context, this is supposedly Oliver commending Larry for getting his film off of the ground. Even though, as I explained above, Larry didn't really have much of a big role in Platoon. Like, yeah, he was a production manager, which is a pretty big job in and of itself, but he was the second production manager and he went uncredited in the final film. I'm not going to assume why Larry went uncredited, but my best guess is he probably didn't do much, I don't know. But moving on to the other suspicious things I have with this book. The next suspicious part I have about the story is the Mortal Kombat Kano story, where Larry explains that for the Mortal Kombat movie, he redesigned Kano. This was because Larry thought that Kano's distinctive feature was too similar to a scene in Terminator 2 where the Terminator's face is half blown off. Then on a trip with a bunch of junior kids going around the studio, one of the kids who saw Kano's redesign completely lost his shit. As Larry explains, he was one step close to a panic attack over Kano's redesign, to which Larry bowed down to the kid's wishes and subsequently reverted to Kano's original design. But then he realized that it didn't matter, so he just changed it back the next day, and the rest is history. One thing that's frustrating when reading the story is that Larry does not go into any detail about what he supposedly redesigned for Kano. All he knows is that he redesigned Kano, some kid lost his shit, then he changed back to Kano's original design, but then he changed back to the redesigned version after thinking about it. I know it sounds a little petty for me to say that, but for a book called A Touch of Madness, you may want to go into a bit more detail about your creativity. Like, you may want to explain what you redesigned from Kano instead of just saying that you redesigned them. From the story, it seems like Larry replaced his metallic eye patch and that he changed it back to his original design. But Kano has a metallic eye patch in the final movie. So what was it that changed? How is something as simple as that story so mind-bogglingly confusing? But maybe it could be real, maybe it couldn't be. I don't know, because as I said, this is more of a suspicion more than a fact. But moving on to the final suspicious thing I find about the story, which is Larry talking about Reanimator, which is a 1985 horror comedy. There are two brief things that I want to mention. First off, Larry says that Vestron financed Reanimator, which just like Platoon, I could not find any information about Vestron financing Reanimator, just knowing that they were part of the home media distribution for it domestically. And just like Platoon, the timeline for when this supposedly happened seems to be fucked. Because since Reanimator came out in 1985 and was a low-budget film, That would mean that it started production in 1984. In 1984, Vestron was merely just a home media company. Even when they started distributing films under Vestron Pictures, they didn't really produce the films, just distributed them. And the production companies are usually the one that finances the movie, or maybe it could be a producer, but it definitely is not the distributor. They are mostly responsible for the marketing of the film. So in either era for Vestron, it would be highly unlikely for them to finance a film. The most they would do is either home media distribution or theatrical distribution, and those types of fields only usually focus on marketing or maybe Final Cut privileges, but not in any way financing. But that is basically every suspicious thing that I have to say, is what I would be saying if I didn't forget FoodFight. Which is funny because despite FoodFight being the brainchild of Larry, it's never mentioned anywhere in this book. And not only is it completely excised from this book, but also from all of Larry's 3 different websites. Even on the Threshold one, FoodFight is just completely wiped. It's like Larry is so embarrassed to admit he is the creator of FoodFight, so he's doing his best to sweep it under the rug. I mean, I don't blame him. If I was the creator of one of the worst movies ever, I'd do my best to sweep it under the rug. And now, it is finally time to review the music video, and I think Martin Scorsese ain't ready for the masterpiece we are about to be watching. So what is the main theme of the music video? Well, I am so glad you asked that. The main gist of the music video seems to be akin to a history lesson, where it name drops famous people like Stan Lee, Albert Einstein, Picasso, Elvis, Michael, the list just basically goes on. With the main point of their inclusion being that what they were doing was considered crazy at first, but it helped influence society in some way, with it all leading up to the main message of the music video. As described in the first line of the chorus, "Don't be lazy, embrace your crazy." In terms of the actual music in the video, it's nothing really to write home about. The best way I could describe the instrumental is safe and sanitized and cooperative. Like, it's not bad music by any means, but it's also not good. The music is exactly how you imagine it to be, so there's nothing really worth complaining about, is what I would be saying if we were critiquing the actual music and not the music video. Cause oh boy, there is a lot to get through. Beginning with the basics, the cinematography is pretty all over the place. Like, sometimes it looks decent, but then other times it just looks like this. Like, why is everything in this picture so garishly ugly? It's like some of these shots were drenched in piss post-production. And even in the shots that I consider okay, the lighting really bogs it down for some of them. It's not that the lighting is awful in some of these shots, but it's just that it's so bland to look at. How is it that someone who's been in the industry for almost 30 years makes a video that looks like this? Like, I know you probably did it on a low budget, but that doesn't really excuse it. Cause I know some YouTubers that have better production value than this. Like, was this the most cheapest rush job that you ever made? Whatever the outcome is, we should actually focus on the rush job part, because that leads us to the next pointer of the video. Is that despite being a video about embracing your creativity, the video uses AI art. A lot of AI art. What happened to not being lazy and embracing your crazy? Were the rules for us and not for you? What even is going on here? I don't know why, but this is so funnily ironic but also maddeningly hypocritical. Like, it's funny you went to use AI art for your music video about creativity, but it's hypocritical because it literally defeats the whole purpose of the song. Why should I embrace creativity when you don't even do it yourself? It also doesn't help that the AI art is all over the place in terms of quality, and some of them range from okay at best to crap. And then you have this one. That man in the silhouette is supposed to be Stan Lee, but that fucking doesn't even look like Stan Lee. Looks like John Hamm or something, I don't know, but that clearly is not Stan Lee. Despite all of that, however, there are only 2 shots that aren't AI generated. The 2 shots in question are Marilyn Monroe and the Beach Boys. These shots then move on to my next pointer, which is a little bit of a history video. You see, alongside having these non-AI generated shots, the video sometimes cuts to B-roll footage of women dancing in skimpy clothing, and the two non-AI generated shots contain a panty shot and a bikini shot. Despite these kind of shots being very out of place for a music video about creativity, and the fact there is no relevant reason as to why they are wearing this type of clothing, but the real reason as to why these women are wearing these skimpy clothing may lie in Larry himself. Case in point, his early web days. Now all of this is explained in the FoodFight documentary that I mentioned earlier in the video, but to briefly sum it up, Larry has had a history of sexualizing women, where back in 1999, his company Threshold Entertainment opened up a website called thethreshold.com. One of the sections contained in the Threshold was Threshold Babes, a place that hosted two things: Bikini Masterpiece Theater and Slumber Party Secrets. Bikini Masterpiece Theater is exactly the masterpiece you expect it to be. It was literally women reading off of Shakespeare, what more can you get? And Slumber Party Secrets that had a very dark way of working. It was a place where girls as young as 13 could share their secrets to the public, and also sharing photos of themselves. Another example of Larry's sexualization with women comes in the form of an interview by Lawrence Kasanoff. The interview is briefly mentioned in Rotten, and the full interview is on Internet Archive. On page 3, Larissa recounts an experience of Larry's sexual proclivities, where Larissa claims that Larry would often tell trade magazines and agents that he was looking to cast a new major female role in one of his new movies. These ranged from Duke Nukem to Mortal Kombat. The women were told to come in with bikinis, and then they would be brought into an apartment with a camera setup. But instead of asking questions based off of the projects, the questions were more sexual and personal. After the session was finished, it was then brought over to the editor, who then edited the interview and then sent it back to Larry. And then the tapes would all disappear and the woman never got a call back. So yeah, that was a lot to take in. But now we have finally reached the end of the video. Man, what a crazy ride that was. I know I didn't read the book in its fullest, but both the book and the music video are very strange in their own way. What with the many inconsistencies in the book and the AI art used in the music video, alongside Larry keeping his tradition of sexualizing women still running and going, it has definitely been a ride for sure.